Tax avoidance is estimated to cost EU countries up to €190 billion in lost revenue every year. In a recent poll, 75% of people surveyed highlighted tax avoidance as something they believe the EU should be doing more to combat. Parliament's Special Tax Committee is pushing for measures designed to tackle tax avoiders and those assisting them. At the forefront is Danish socialist Jeppe Kofod. What specific measures does he propose?
Some of the things we are fighting for is, for example, for the banks and law firms and accounting firms to have real sanctions if they engage in tax evasion, and if they do it repeatedly and systematically. At the end of the day, it should be possible for them to lose their license to run a business. Also, a better protection of whistleblowers. I mean, journalists, but also employees that are actually telling the public about these things about tax avoidance, aggressive tax planning, so on. They should be protected better. We know there's a trial in Luxembourg after the LuxLeaks that the whistleblowers has been trialed. I think it's very shameful.
There's already plenty of steps being taken globally, led by the OECD. What is the European Union and the European Parliament in particular adding to that process?
Well, first of all, the OECD BEPS plan to fight base erosion, profit shifting of big corporations are so important to implement effectively also in the single European market. So that's what we're pointing at. We need country-by-country reporting publicly. We need also, when it comes to ownership issues, as also in the aftermath of the Panama Papers, we need to identify beneficial owners so we can see who is behind shell companies, who is behind trust and so on, and do they pay the taxes that they should. So these type of legislation we need to follow up concretely in European Union. And also, when we deal with third countries that acts like a tax haven, we need clear sanctions if they're not going to cooperate to implement the OECD standards.
The Parliament's Special Tax Committee got a second incarnation. Since the Panama Papers leaks, we've seen the establishment of a new committee of inquiry. What will that inquiry committee be able to achieve that the tax committee isn't able to achieve?
Well, first, it's much more powerful. It can legally request documents from EU institutions, from member states, and the tax committee was a special committee, so it has some limits to its mandate. So it will have stronger, more powerful mandate, and also it will look in a broader field of issues. So of course tax avoidance, tax evasion, but also money laundering, like we saw in the Panama issue, where criminals, real drug dealers or terrorists or even corruption can be involved in many ways by these secret structures that you have in Panama. So we can go much deeper and look at whether the actions and legislation we have in EU is sufficient to deal with these problems with third countries. And I think it's not, so we need to strengthen that so we can dig deeper into these issues.
How important is it for you as a politician representing Europeans here in the Parliament to get this right, to perhaps restore confidence in European institutions?
It's fundamental to me. If our tax base is eroded by tax evasion, tax avoidance at a big scale like we see today, who should pay for the schools, for the hospitals, for the public goods?
And outside of the kind of economic argument you've just put, what about the kind of confidence and faith in the institutions?
Yeah, very much so, because many citizens feel rightly that our institutions, governments, EU institutions, are failing to ensure tax justice in an area of globalization where economy is global, where capital is fleeing freely around the world to an extended degree, where also we see that inequality are on the rise globally and internally in societies because of this, and they see that there's massive tax avoidance at the same time. So it's rebuilding trust that our institutions, our governments, democratic elected people, they can actually fight back on this very negative trend.
And what about the reason why tax avoidance is possible in the first place, or one of the reasons, which is tax competition between member states? I mean, how would you seek to redress that problem?
You can set your own tax rate, tax structure in your member state, but if that system you adopt in legislation has a very negative impact on your neighbor, a very bad tax regime, then it's a problem for the single market, it's a problem for tax justice. So I think we should strengthen our cooperation in the single market in the EU with all 28 member states, so avoiding these very harmful tax regimes, patent boxes, knowledge boxes, one example, where you in reality just helping big multinationals to evade taxes. So I think that's the way to go, but I know it's a big challenge.
It seems to me how much other